Good evening. My name is Terry Kennedy, and I'm the director of the Creative Writing Program here at UNC Greensboro. On behalf of the MFA Writing Program and the Greensboro Review, it is my great pleasure to welcome you all to tonight's reading by UNCG MFA Writing Program alum and former Greensboro Review fiction editor, Kathy Flann. I've been a fan of Kathy's work since reading A Happy, Safe Thing in the 1996 edition of New Stories from the South. What I liked about her writing back then, and why I keep going back to it book after book, is the way she deftly navigates some of the most important, at least to me, tensions of life. More specifically, the tension between love and grief, between life's absurdity and its unavoidable tragedy. Those moments when you really don't know if you should laugh or cry. Maybe this is why I find it so easy to empathize and empathize deeply with her characters, no matter how flawed they might seem on the surface. Maybe this is why you do too. The ability to empathize with others is a gift, perhaps even the gift that makes us human, which is to say, the gift that gives us our humanity. But to take that gift and create empathy for entirely fictitious characters, well, that's art, and it's difficult to do. The ability to empathize with others, whoa, I totally lost my place. Sorry, guys. Which brings me to Kathy's latest book, How to Survive a Human Attack, a guide for werewolves, mummies, cyborgs, ghosts, nuclear mutants, and other movie monsters. Is it possible for those of us living in 2021 to empathize with a zombie, for instance? No one should deny that the world, seemingly now more than ever, is full of monsters. But werewolves, nuclear mutants, how should we respond to their pain and suffering? I don't have the answer myself, but I suspect Kathy, in fact, does. Kathy Flann is the author of the short story collection Smoky Ordinary, winner of the Serena McDonald Kennedy Award, Get a Grip, winner of the George Garrett Fiction Prize, and the aforementioned How to Survive a Human Attack, as well as a book of essays, Write On, Secrets to Crafting Better Stories. Her work appears in all the best journals and anthologies, including the Gettysburg Review, the North American Review, Shenandoah, and New Stories from the South. Kathy currently teaches writing at Johns Hopkins Center of Talented Youth and lives with her husband, son, and 11-pound Yorkie. Please join me in welcoming Kathy Flann.
I'm just trying to unmute myself. Can you see me okay? Okay. All right, good. Well, thanks everyone, and thanks for that really nice introduction. I, was the best thing ever. I always remember being at UNCG was like going to these readings and there would be alums there, and I just treasured those events so much. So I feel really honored to be, and I remember people saying this then, like they couldn't believe like they were reading, and they used to watch people come read who were alums, and now they were reading, and now I'm doing that. And it's like, wow, I just feel really touched to be invited. And this has always been one of the most important communities of my life, and will be for a lot of the people watching as well. And the friendship with Terry has been one of the most important of my life. And we were, we happened to be in the program at the same time. And, all these years later, here he is keeping it going. And I think doing so in fine fashion. I think Jim would be so proud. I think about that a lot. So, I just really appreciate Terry, your dedication to something that means so much to so many of us, and really wouldn't continue in the same illustrious way without you and your guidance. You're just such a force. So thank you really for having me. It just means a lot. So I'm just kind of forging ahead here. So I'm here to talk about whatever really anyone wants to talk about as far as fiction. And if there are specific things, feel free to prompt me. I've got all the books you mentioned right next to me. So if there's anything anyone wants me to talk about, I'm ready. But since the latest thing is How to Survive a Human Attack, and I know that folks have read that, that's what I was going to focus on. But again, feel free to move me a different direction. How to Survive a Human Attack. I'll tell you a little bit about how this happened. I've always been a short story writer, and I just fell in love with that form. I just remember as an undergrad, like reading short stories and just not really even knowing before that they existed exactly. I just was introduced to them as a college student. I'd read a lot as a kid. I just read novels like crazy because that's what was in our house. And it's kind of what you get introduced to at school, I guess. Mostly you get like the red badge of courage or something at school, but it wasn't like, you weren't reading collections of stories, it seemed, So the idea of like almost like an album, I was really into music. So there was this idea like all of a sudden, like, what, you could do this and it could be like an album, And I just loved it. I just fell in love with the form. And so I just always felt like people looked at it like training for a novel, but to me it wasn't that, to me it was just this beautiful thing that was its own form and had maybe more in common with poetry in some ways, which I also loved. So I just fell in love with it. That was all I wanted to do, was just write these short form pieces. And I wasn't thinking about a book, really. And then, just you keep going and keep going, and then you have this stuff. And I remember someone saying to me something about these being a book, and I was like, are they? They're a book? So now I have to start thinking about the actual album, if you will, rather than just the stories. And what are they? And I remember someone saying, it was just in the program, I remember someone saying something along the lines of, not about my work particularly, but just about a collection in general. Like, what if it's like you're playing the same song over and over, like when you put it all together, maybe each one is good, but when you put it all together, is it all going to sound like the same song? And I was like, what? Like, no, I never thought about that before. So I was like, really, like, oh, I have to think about this. I need to ponder what I'm doing as a project, not just the short form pieces. So what was going to unite these pieces? And it just sort of, I felt like with the first one, which a lot of those stories I did write in the program, I felt like it was united by place. I just didn't know it at the time when I was writing them. It was like the same town kind of over and over again. And I started having cameos of different people and different stories crossing over and stuff. And then, so that continued. And then when I moved to Baltimore, I ended up doing another collection that was all place-based and set in Baltimore, much more consciously that second time. I felt like, I was just thinking about this today, I felt like in my second collection, as I went along, the characters, you talked about them being flawed, I felt like they became much more monstrous in the second book than in the first. And I felt like I was much sweeter in the first book. And then in the second book, it was like, I almost wanted to see how flawed they could be. You know what I mean? Like, and could I still connect with them in some way? And I wanted to kind of, I don't know, maybe just like living more and kind of seeing more monstrous things in myself or being willing to acknowledge them. I felt like that was more of a preoccupation than ever before. So I actually was really taken aback when I published the book and people would say, stuff about like, this person is horrible, and stuff. And I'd be like, yeah, they are. But like, I also think like they have this humanity. So it would it was weird. It was like a weird kind of discordance in myself when I would hear reactions or like, this is so depressing, someone would say to me. I'd be like, oh, really? Like, I wonder what that says about me. And so I just kind of became more and more interested in like, these kinds of perceptions and these kind of darker themes. So that all of that, when that book was published, was around the time when I started writing this human attack book. Now, rewind also, I'm sorry, I'm going on and on just to get to this preface of this humor book. But like, I feel like when I first started writing stories, I was at Auburn actually, because I did an MA at Auburn before I came to UNCG. And one of the things that I was often told was, you're too funny. This is too funny, and I can feel too much of your presence behind this character. And it's like, you can't make jokes just to make jokes, because then that's about you and it's not about, you're like using them as a puppet kind of. So I felt like, oh, okay, I got to tone it down a little bit because I'm just being like a little bit too much of a ham. And I had done stand-up comedy when I was an undergraduate and so on. So, just trying to navigate tonally, like how to write a story. And I just revered always all my mentors. So if they told me to do something, I was like, yes, I will never be funny again. Like it was like that. So I felt like I was learning how to calibrate these different parts of myself. So when I was playing with the idea of flawed characters and I wrote, I got to the end of that book with Get a Grip, the one in Baltimore, it's more gritty. People would often call it gritty. I felt like that was the moment when it sort of organically happened. It wasn't conscious, but it sort of organically happened that my husband was in the other room watching The Walking Dead. And mostly we have the same taste in TV, but I was like, I don't like this show. And I didn't know why, because everything about it should be something I like. So I would just sit in the other room and I was like trying to write something. I was commissioned to write an essay, and I was sitting there trying to think of what I was going to write for this essay. And I could hear the screams of these zombies in the other room. They were just screaming and screaming, and it was so loud. And I was like, they're really bad at this. Like, these zombies are really not good. Like, they need help, basically. I was like, they are getting slaughtered and they need help. So I just instantly, instead of doing what I was supposed to be doing, started writing this advice piece for these zombies. And I wrote it in the form of like FAQs that you always see on a website. So I didn't really know what it was. I worked on it for a few weeks. I was like, this is weird. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's an essay, so because I was supposed to be writing an essay. So I was like, maybe this is an essay. So I, had a few people look at it, and then I sent it out, and it was like accepted immediately at this place, Word Riot, which is no longer exists, but was more, they were really into experimental forms and stuff. So I was like, maybe I'm experimental now, I don't know. So I wrote that, and then it was like, okay, people really seem to like that. And I suddenly felt like, oh, my first published story that I ever wrote was called Black Lagoon. And it was about these teenagers that were both experiencing grief, and they go to see The Creature from the Black Lagoon in the movies, like in 3D and everything, which was a movie my mother had taken me to and I adored, but also haunted me like the rest of my life and still does. It's so kitschy and weird, but it's also like, I felt for the monster, and then I felt weird about feeling for the monster, because you're kind of can tell you're not supposed to. So then it was like immediately like, I got to write something for this monster in the Swamp Monster movie. So I wrote then Swamp Monster Makeovers. Swamp Monster Makeovers. I just thought, well, he's the only one of his kind, and like, he just wants a friend, and he kind of looks human shaped. So if he just could like blend in a little better, then maybe he could find what he wants, and stop abducting people, and like, he won't have to. So then that ended up getting taken at a humor magazine. So it was like, oh, okay. Like, I was still just finding my way with it. And then I wrote the Compendium of Human Repellents, because I was like, well, all the monsters can use this, And then, there was a big break in between. This was like, I don't know, 2014 or something. And there was just this long period after that where it was just dormant. Like, I didn't really do much with it, partly because I didn't really know what it was, partly because the market for it seemed dubious. Like I thought this could be a book, but is it? And what is it? And what is this thing? I had to figure it out for myself. But then also the agent I had at the time was having none of it, like just didn't like it at all. So I was like, well, I ended up deciding to try to find an agent for it eventually. It took me a lot of time and like developing some confidence. And so I found, my agent, Courtney, who's wonderful and loved it and, has been such a champion of it the whole time. At times when I just, it was hard to know if there would ever be an audience for it. And, it's just, I feel like the world changed in between. And so it was like, all of a sudden, like Terry said in his intro, it was like the idea of humans as antagonists started to make a lot more sense. I mean, over the last few years, for sure, so I felt like things kind of came together in a way, that they weren't coming together when I first started thinking about it. So that's a long-winded, way of kind of giving you this introduction, but just to provide the context, for what this book is. And I, honestly, sometimes I'm still not sure what it is, but so anyway, the thing I wanted to do was share the screen, and I was going to show, for anyone who hasn't got familiarity with the book, I know some people have read it that are here, and maybe some people haven't. So I just wanted to show I wanted to share screen and show you the table of contents here, just to give a sense of what it is. What it turned out to be was, like the first thing in part 2, which is the species-specific survival guides, is the zombie one that I first wrote that I mentioned to you. So it's a revised version of it, but it's, it is very much kind of shaped like it started to be. I guess one other caveat I should say is that in the process of trying to figure out what this was and what the market for it was and so on, it became a graphic novel script at one point that Courtney suggested, like, hey, what if this was a graphic novel instead of, a prose guide? And so I worked on changing it into a graphic novel script. And then when we sent it out, the editor, Jess, at Running Press, who ended up acquiring it, said, I like it, but like, could it not be a graphic novel instead? Could it just be a prose guide? We were like, well, as it happens, we do have a concept for that. So that worked out great. But I think the cool thing about changing it to a graphic novel and then back again was that it was so visual by the time it returned that it had a roadmap of sorts for the illustrators in places to follow that wouldn't have been there had this whole long process not occurred. So I thought that was pretty cool, the way that all happened. But in the process of putting this together, there were already, some of the guides already existed, as I mentioned, for each monster. So each chapter in part 2 has like these different guides for different monsters that follow different conceits. So I would just think about like, what is the monster's basic problem? Like, how does he, and it's usually he, how does he, expire at the end of the movie? And like, what is his basic vulnerability that humans exploit in this story? And so then I would work backwards from that, and I would think, well, what does he need in order for that not to happen? And I would try to use some familiar trope to give that across. So it'd be like with The Mummy, for example, which that one actually didn't start as a short story first, and then I converted it into this survival guide eventually. But it was like, what was his problem? Well, his problem was home security. I finally figured out. It was like he's getting these people breaking into his house all the time, and like he wakes up in his little sarcophagus and there's like people, like looking at him or trying to take all his stuff. So it was like, that's why I ended up going with the, third eye tomb security system for The Mummy. And so I looked at like the instructions for a Ring doorbell basically, and then kind of adapted that into, I would have notes, I would rewatch things and I would read things about the movies that feature that monster. And then I would like try to combine that with the conceit I had come up with. So I would have like all these things I wanted to hit with the plots of different mummy movies, for example. And then I would see like, how does that fit in with the troubleshooting tips for a Ring doorbell? And I was trying to kind of weave these weird things together. And sometimes I just loved how weird it like would become. I was like, oh my gosh, that is so bizarre. But I am always, as Terry can tell you from knowing me a long time, I love the bizarre so much that that probably comes as a surprise to no one. So I'm just gonna show you one little chapter. So that's just like this ridiculously long overview of how we ended up here. But this is the cover, and Joseph McDermott was the illustrator, just wonderful, and did this cover. So I'm just going to go through the Compendium of Human Repellents, which, as I say, I wrote early on, before I really had an idea of what this was. It's been revised, but when I did the sorry, I'm scrolling too fast. Let me go a little bit slower here. When I did this compendium, I hadn't written most of the book yet, but it was just a thing of thinking about what were all the things you could have or do, or things you had at your disposal if you were a monster that would make people go away. Because ultimately that's your goal. It's like, you're like, okay, just, I don't even have to, if you just go away, I don't have to kill you, or I'll eat you or whatever, like, so these were the things I came up with. So from all the, just like looking at all the movies that you can think of with monsters, a lot of times teeth, that's a big deal because, our teeth are really not very impressive. So I feel like when you have the close-ups of teeth in the movies, it's always like, whoa, like we don't have teeth like that. So I felt like teeth is important. Humans, as I say here, humans have big flat front teeth like horses, so not scary. They're suitable for eating chard or craisins, but in a fight, a light switch cover plate would make a better weapon. If you're packing impressive ivory, and let's face it, anything will be impressive relative to humans with their amphitheater of molars, flasher wares. So see, I like the practically identical. That's fantastic. So there's, here we go. I'm sorry, I'm just really not doing a good job with the scrolling. Okay, glistening saliva. So this is with the fangs. This makes a nice companion to fangs. So produce as much saliva as you can. Shiny or stringy saliva will ward off humans more effectively than dry ones. So you've seen those scenes in movies so many times. The close-up of the teeth so often has the saliva. This is something that we do not like. So you can use light to help with that, head angles, that kind of thing. This is an illustration of what that might look like. You might want some Sour Patch Kids. So staring, that's another thing we don't like. Staring. No matter how many times a human says, "Can I help you?" you must stare without speaking. The steady, unwavering gaze is what wards them off. Humans actually love to stare at each other until their eyes bulge and they lose mouth control. This typically has the effect of soliciting more engagement, not less. If one catches another in the act, a call and response ritual ensues, and this is what must be avoided at all costs. It looks like this. What are you looking at, says human number one. And this can be expressed via a scowl, moving my little picture over here. Here we go. A scowl or non-verbally or verbally. So if it is verbal, the human number two will say nothing. And then the nonverbal version involves breaking the stare and pretending that he or she was about to engage in a casual armpit sniff anyway. And regardless of how it's conveyed, this response is a lie. So I can do this without skipping too ahead. So actually, human number two was admiring that toupee. It matched human number one's head so perfectly. Where would a person get something like that? Was that real hair? Was there a warranty? Would it be okay to compliment it if the phrasing was just right? And actually, human number one does want to be looked at. This bus route goes to the audition for a TV program called Hair Jockeys. Guttural noises. If you are capable of growls or agonized moans, now is the time to release them. Start quiet and get louder. These emissions are another thing that humans want to do quite badly, especially on overbooked flights. The fact that you are doing something they can't will make them retreat and possibly sulk. Halitosis. Humans eradicate their own bacterial fragrances with solvents and pastes. These are often blue, probably to call less attention to those ineffectual teeth. Smelly breath can really set off your fangs, especially if you expend it in a visible cloud. Alternatively, death breath can be a special calling card for hordes. Hello there, I'm decaying. Don't have any of the items on the list so far? Get some dogs. They have them all. Hellhounds are a time-honored tradition. So this is an augmented version of what's in the book. And you'll see here, my hellhound is actually in this photograph as an illustration. This is my 10-pound hellhound here, which is very scary. Cash. Money can both attract and repel humans, mainly because of cryptocurrency. Is this in the way? Let me move this down here. Let's see. Don't want you to miss out on this. The well-placed bundle of banknotes can dampen any desire to protect humanity or even just the guy with the pet ferrets. Use caution, they'll go where the loot is, and if you keep it too close, you may wake up to hands groping your morning suit, thorax, sack dress, or motherboard. Reduced visibility. Humans imagine that if they can see you, they can take you down, thus you won't eat them or conquer them. Put them off their game by carrying out your activities in these environments. See if I can get this to go up. There we go. Fog, trees, corn maze, romantic restaurant, blizzard, tomb, basement, or stoner's bedroom, mist, murk. There's more. Ocean, smoggy futuristic city, wormhole, rustic cabin, ghost ship, any place that has passageways, castle, space station, etc., and the IKEA marketplace. Don't forget about speed. Let them glimpse just a tail, a fin, a glowing eye, an undead sidekick. If the surprise has its effect, the human will exclaim, "What's that?" followed by "shh" and "stop shushing me." There's dead zones. You have the dead zone type 1, which is filling your lair, tomb, ship, or hive with dead bodies, human bodies, that is. They don't like those. Dead zone type 2 is spending your time in an area with no cell phone signal. Oops, go down. So you could use a fog machine so you don't have to rely on Mother Nature. It's an option for you. Oops, I'm having a heck of a time with this scrolling. That's another thing, the way they get you, the humans. So humans like to feel that they've been brave, that they've not been cowards. Sometimes when they have the sense that they've been victorious, they'll go away and tell their friends. So if you're able to speak, here are some phrases to practice. I'll be feeling that in the morning. How is it that you always look great, even in sweatpants? Have you considered becoming an executioner, like professionally? Every time you're knocked down, you get back up. You're the most perfect you there is. That's a sick rocket launcher. I believe a large sexual member correlates to such a device. You are even more beautiful on the inside than on the outside for the one who keeps fighting, even with entrails spilling. Insects. This is, of course, excellent news for many types of swarms. Your very existence is a human repellent. For everyone else, consider recruiting insects to your headquarters. Cockroaches, for example, have mastered audible footfalls. The telltale skittle across the linoleum or metallic potato chip bags, see reduced visibility. Tip, spiders are not technically insects, but since 3.5% of humans have arachnophobia, they are an excellent choice as well. The closer to human hand size, the better. Spiders are maestros of the slow walk, normally toward a crotch or a face. Public speaking, like I'm doing now. You guys are getting me in all kinds of ways with the technology and whatnot. Since 25% of the human population fears this more than death or even being asked to dance, why not set up a PowerPoint presentation in your hideout and perhaps a cardboard audience taped to ballroom chairs from the Holiday Inn? When the human bursts into the place, fingers looped into some grenades, say, "Where have you been? Everyone's waiting." Turn on the projector. Keep an IT ghoul on retainer to wrangle the clicker, locate a Mac-compatible cord, troubleshoot the Wi-Fi, etc. That's you, Jesse, right? Mucus. Can you secrete, exude, or spew? Maybe your mucus provides a protective coating from the toxic bioluminescent substance in the cavern where you live. Or maybe you're just phlegmy from all the guttural noises. Either way, embrace the green stuff. The presence of mucus has been proven to increase your odds of survival in your first skirmish with humans by 11%. A tip, slithering makes an excellent companion to mucus. It requires some flexibility through the hips. Practice in a mirror if you are visible there. Intimacy. The only thing humans dislike more than solitude is commitment. Here are some useful phrases that may repel humans. Where do you see this relationship going? Would you like to meet my sire / offspring / egg sac / colony? Let's take a trip together. Did you get my text? Oops, I missed one. Whoops. Oh, see? Okay, let me see if I got it. Oh, no, I guess I didn't. Heights. You may be tempted. Oh, this one, that's why it said access earlier. This one doesn't want to play, which is too bad because that's a funny one. You may be tempted to hide in a burrow or cave, but consider looking up. Humans are afraid of heights, and they should be. They do not have claws, wings, or upper body strength, nor do they have any landing capabilities. In fact, they fall end over end like bowling pins, and they bounce on contact. This is one of their more logical fears. If you choose a mountaintop layer, they will have to hike there, which will offer plenty of time for them to argue about who was supposed to pack the Cliff Bars. It will also allow you time to prepare the PowerPoint presentation, see public speaking. Caution, if you have no wings or landing capabilities yourself, there is some folly in choosing this option. Oops. Oh, come on you. There we go. Overshare. No human wants an honest account of you. Discuss any of the following topics, and even the most aggressive human is likely to vacate the premises. Poor self-worth, hating one's mother, lesions or discharges, paucity of followers on one's Instagram, overheated circuitry, loving or hating Hallmark movies, and, quote, all these maggots are itchy. While most humans will be put off by oversharing, the ones who are not may be of special concern. Watch for one-upsmanship, i.e. human hates self or mother more than you, has runnier lesions, saw a maggot once, etc. Worse than a human who wants to bludgeon you is one who, quote, feels you. You will think, why don't I just rip this person's jawbone off the hinge? But it will somehow seem complicated. Public displays of affection. Mating behavior, especially in a Starbucks, tends to be repugnant to humans. They bring their hands to their eyes, leading some experts to believe that they experience a burning sensation. The more tongue that's involved, the more acute the discomfort seems to be. If a gang of aggressive humans approaches, you may be tempted to eat a few. That's probably your idea of engaging your tongue. But for now, grab one of your minions and make out with it instead. Tip. When humans witness mating displays on their computer screens rather than at the mall, especially screens within their dwellings or cubicles, the opposite effect can occur, a kind of hypnosis. Reduce the number of humans who will notice your hunting or colonizing activities by loading their devices with titles like Pulp Friction or Shaving Ryan's Privates. Even if they don't exactly like the films, they'll be curious about how the friction and shaving will play out. Identity theft. Humans love the notion of individuality. In the 200,000 years of humanity, no one has ever been quite like me. But all of those unique me's tend to choose the same passwords. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Password, let me in, and their ilk. Any type of identity theft challenges their collective view of themselves as irreplaceable. But if the notion of an imposter charging a Paula Deen Coastal Breeze Eurotop mattress is destabilizing, imagine the reaction when you show up wearing the human's own face. Bonus, what are they going to do? Attack themselves? So more human repellents to consider. Adding them to a mass mailing list, email list, consumption of live animals, effusive compliments, brushing teeth in a public restroom, long Wi-Fi passwords, kissing when you first meet, small blobs of brain matter, mouth sounds while chewing, paperwork, not wiping down machines you've used at the gym, anything dangling, eyeballs, arms, teeth, air freshener, silence, confusion over whether to hug or shake hands, work retreat, long coffee order that includes the term half-calf, most types of whaling, vague status updates, the success of your startup, see ego stroking. And then questions. So I'm happy to read something else that's what I have as a PowerPoint, but I have obviously got the books, and I'm also happy to answer actual questions or any that monsters want to ask as well. I'm happy to do that as well. Does that work, Terry? Or I didn't know if questions were actually possible, actually. No, they're not possible. Oh, okay. Do you want me to read some more? Do you want me to read a little more, or should I stop? Keep going? Read a little more? Okay. Well, I could read, let me think. I'm just going to pretend that I'm taking a request. How about that? What would I want to hear if I were you? Maybe, let's see. Read one short piece. Okay, got it. Will do. Okay, so I could do, since I mentioned the zombie one, I could read a little bit of that because that was kind of how it all got started, was this zombie piece. So that might be cool, just to give you the sense of the kind of original sin, if you will, of how I got started on this whole thing. So this, there are all these great illustrations. That's why when I got started on doing events, I was like, I have to do like a PowerPoint presentation because like the illustrator is so amazing, and the designer as well did actually a lot of work as far as the visuals. And her name is Celeste Joyce. So there was like a whole team behind this, which was a cool experience. I've never worked collaboratively like that. But this is called Frequently Asked Questions About Snacking and Mortality. And it's a zombie's guide to filling the emptiness and moving forward. So some of these pieces, like I would look a lot at self-help and stuff like that, and try to kind of capture some of the tone of that. Humans may look and smell delicious, but don't kid yourself. The statistics are staggering. Humans inflict more injuries on zombies than subway platforms or the tangle of the zombie's own pants. Humans are frenetic. There are those machete beheadings, predictable in their unpredictability. Humans may also employ gunshots, yank your limbs hard enough to remove them, or stick the odd kitchen utensil in your eye. Zombies have evolved beyond fear, largely due to non-functional amygdala. And yet it's true that being the object of hatred is exhausting. Have faith, you are not alone. These challenges are more universal than you realize, no matter who you are, the corpse in the fast food uniform or the corpse in the tattered business attire. The desires are universal. You want the same things as anyone else, to keep walking so that rigor mortis won't set in and to score some delicious brain steam. But how? Your distinguishing characteristic, the inattention to safety, provides potential for advantages and disadvantages. You'll have a 50-50 chance of emerging victorious from the next skirmish, maybe even with a full belly and both arms attached. Not that you care exactly, it isn't that you are Zen, but there are certain sanguine qualities that come with being undead. You understand that passion exists only in relation to despair, and you are burdened with neither one. Still, if you had your druthers, perhaps you'd prefer snacking on gray matter without sacrificing your own limbs. Here are a series of the most frequently asked zombie questions. Question number 1, loud noise. Brains over there? Probably all you will find over there is your own beheading. Unlike zombies, humans are capable of something called deceit. It will never occur to you that you are being tricked. But take heart, follow these instructions and you will be able to, well, take hearts. The next time you careen toward a noise, why not knock over some shelves? Humans collect stuff. They think the weight of it will create permanence. When these items topple, items that humans have spent years amassing and more years arranging just so onto modular units, You might get lucky. With just the right angle, maybe that IKEA thermofoil wood grain will actually crush someone. Maybe brains will fall out for easy access. But even if you don't crush anyone, humans will be unnerved to have their sense of permanence dashed in one swift blow, and you may yet catch a stunned one. You might hear something like, "Oh no, not my 1/6 scale action figures." Go toward that. Thank you for putting the full screen. Sorry, I didn't do that myself. Number two, this one, I mean, it's very visual, so I'm gonna just show it to you more so. I've got a glare there. Okay, so the number two is humans use tools, I not, still want brains. Yes, you do, and you can have them, but it's important to realize that humans will resist, and that's the illustration of them resisting. I like the lawnmower. They'll resist with guns, knives, bats, helicopters, flamethrowers, lawnmowers, and trained monkeys. As we've discussed, they don't comprehend that death is inevitable. They refer to the future as the rest of my life, a phrase they use interchangeably with, quote, forever. Zombies know that there is no such thing as forever. There is only now, and it is always brains o'clock. You are always active, always seeking. No one's going to find you smoking weed and watching The Voice. Humans don't see that by eating their brains, you provide a quick death, more merciful than cancer or liver failure. Instead, they try to avoid contemplating any of it, which would be admirably zombie-like if they could actually do it. The main thing to do is to stick together. Zombies have a capacity for togetherness that humans can't understand, and they can't kill all of you. And you're not afraid to die. You've already done it once. The fact that zombies don't sell each other out baffles humans. As a result, they lose the grip on those machetes, their aim gets shaky, and then they betray one another. Your tools are selflessness and persistence. It's all for one and one for all. There's really no downside. You will either die and thus be released from the hunger that sears your intestines, or you will eat some delicious brains and feel pretty okay for those few minutes. The third question is brains, and the answer is brains with an exclamation mark. I just feel like that's what a lot of their question would be. And that is the answer. And then number four, humans fast. How I bite into skull. It's hard to believe, but relative to other animals, humans are slow. Even the fastest human ever documented ran just 27 miles per hour and maintained that velocity for only a few seconds. And yet humans eat animals that can outrun them twice over or outweigh them by so much that trampling should be an easy defense. How do they do it? Humans believe that they're dominant, and belief can become reality. They let panicked animals defeat themselves. There's a song in The Lion King called The Circle of Life, in which, via animated lions that represent humans themselves, humans teach their offspring that eating friends from other species is the natural order. The zebras in the movie are somehow totally cool with it. But humans don't like the circle of life theory when they are the ones staring into the chomping Pac-Man mouth of that circle. Humans are primitive creatures that are afraid to die and afraid to suffer. You represent mortality and pain, and these truths will always stun them. The more the humans think about death, especially their own deaths, the more panicked they'll get, the more confused, the more like a bird that bashes against its own reflection. Bring the point home by ripping off your own finger or rip off an ear as you approach. It is a small price to pay for those brains. So this is the illustration that goes with, I don't know if you can see that, with humans eating things that are faster than they are. And that's the Otto's ostrich shack there. Number 5, what is planning? Humans envision things that they do not like. They spend hours of time and energy on these thoughts and worries, even though it is, as any zombie could tell them, impossible to envision every possible scenario one might not like. The voice in a human's head chatters like a squirrel. What if this is the voice of the human, it's all in italics, this part. What if the zombie crashes through these replacement windows? They were top of the line and cost 6 months' salary, and what if none of that matters in the end? What if I've wasted my life having a job and making money, which is, after all, nothing but paper? What if the dog won't stop barking and I have to kill it? What if this spot on my hand is skin cancer? Will the undead smell it? Yes. What if my wife leaves me for that dreamy zombie killer in the chaps and bandolier? Humans then devote themselves to preventing these things that have not occurred and may never occur, wasting energy that could be spent on eating or walking, or heck, on the bizarre things they enjoy, like styling the hair on their heads, kissing, or posting reviews on Yelp. Humans throw around phrases like organize before they rise, they meaning you, or it's never too soon to prepare for the zombie apocalypse. At their core, they are simple creatures like fish, but rather than owning their fear and fleeing the way small animals do, humans like to imagine that they are bold, but they have confused bravery with braggadocio. They understand that fear is primitive and they wish to see themselves as advanced. Planning is a component in this process. They amass weapons and duct tape and canteens and gas masks. They position themselves on rooftops and inside rain barrels and on rickety canoes, contorting themselves into positions that make their fragile backs ache. There is so much talking. If the humans say things like, we planned for this, we got this, that's a good sign. People don't say, we got this, unless they doubt they do. It is the battle cry of the planners, the people who know deep down that the control they seek doesn't exist. Even if they put a hand grenade in your mouth today, something else will come for them tomorrow. Don't worry, not that you would. They don't got this. Number 6, why the light flashes? Why not hungry anymore? Probably they chopped your head off and it is now careening down a hill. Zombies have the capacity for appreciation of beauty that humans do not. As a result, humans like to set off a flare gun or fireworks show to distract you, to tilt your gaze toward the heavens. No matter the pain in your belly, the fatigue from dragging your legs, you have stopped. You have let your creaking jaw drop. Orange is streaking across the stars, an explosion, a sparkle flower of color. With a lucky roll, you could totally land face up. The happiest ending of all. And what a show. That's the little illustration at the end there. That's my little short taste of these. This is one of my favorite chapters, though, by the way, is the Swamp Monster Makeovers that I mentioned to you before. I just think the illustrations are like out of this world. This is such a visual chapter. And I mean, he just nailed it, you know? It's really incredible. I was going to show you some of his makeovers. There he is. You've got the power broker. You've got the Brooklyner, the gamer. This is the Brooklyner with the plaid shirt, of course. The emo. So, you know, he's got all kinds of options to survive. So that's one of my favorite, visually, that's probably my favorite chapter. But the zombie one is, you know, more prose heavy than the Swamp Monster one or some of the other ones. So that seemed like a good one. If I was going to read, you know, that's a good one to do. What else do you guys want me to talk about? Anything else I should know, Terry? Looking at the chat. Do you want me to read more, or is that good, or what do you want to do? Stop. You want me to keep going? No, stop. Okay. Well, thank you for indulging me, everyone. You know, I am, as you can see, a little bit of a ham, so I appreciate the indulgence. And I appreciate everyone in the MFA program who read the book. And, you know, humor is a very particular thing. So I always imagine that, you know, if you're forced to read it, probably some people were like, yeah, you know. But to anyone who laughed, thank you. Do you want me to, is that good?